And I'm going to point my finger, generally speaking, at the top, at the people who are ultimately in charge, which is the elected councillors. And over the years, I've observed what happens to a staffer when they actually act out on engaged empowerment, or when they act out on courageous change. I think one of the problems with the Herkimer and Charlton bike lanes is that they're actually quite good, unlike a lot of other cycling infrastructure that we've installed over the years. And the reason they're quite good is that, for a change, in trying something new, trying something courageous, city staff sat down with members of the Kirkendall and Durand neighborhoods who had an interest in cycling and said, okay, what can we do here? This is how much right-of-way we have. How can we do the best kind of bike lane? And so they came up with a model that physically protects the bike lanes by putting a row of parked cars in between them. And there was about 2 years of back and forth, and there was a number of design iterations, and each new version that came out was a little bit better, addressed a few more concerns, eliminated a few more of the bugs. I realize I'm lapsing back into a programming metaphor, so I'll try not to do that. But
I'm still reeling about that dog fooding comment you made. I'd never heard that before.
It was an epiphany for me.
I'll never forget it.
Oh, yeah. And so when they finally installed it, it was actually quite good. Now, I went just today because a certain West Mountain councillor was complaining that there should be quote-unquote balance in terms of how the roadway is allocated. So about 15 to 18% of the road is allocated for cycling, and the other 72 to 75% of the road is allocated for cars, either moving cars or parking cars. So I think in terms of balance, I think the only change you could make to reduce the amount of cycling amenity would be to eliminate it altogether, which would go back to the completely unbalanced system we had prior.
And unsafe.
A system in which the city installed a mobile speed radar on Herkimer a couple of years ago. And what they found was that there were cars going 80, 90 kilometers an hour down a residential neighborhood, past a park, at all hours of the day. At 8 o'clock in the morning when kids are walking to school, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when kids are walking home from school. And so that is what these two councillors who were complaining about traffic being slowed down, that's what they're complaining about. You can no longer drive at 90 kilometers an hour down Herkimer Street, which is a local collector. It's not an arterial road. It is a street meant for local traffic primarily, and local traffic includes people walking and cycling. So we have a situation where staff actually tried to do something better. They actually tried to take a resident-centered approach, and they're being punished for it. And it's not the first time. Last year, you're all going to know this story, the province established a fund and said, we're making some matching funds available for the cities for cycling infrastructure, capital projects. And the city of Hamilton staff submitted a proposal to build a protected two-way cycle track on Bay Street, north and south.
Essentially, we talked about it on this show.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And first of all, this was to be perfectly clear, this was a staff member doing exactly what their job requires. This is a project that was approved by council. It was a priority that was identified and signed off by council. Council directed staff to find the best way to implement this list of cycling projects, with an emphasis on the priority projects. And that's exactly what the staffer did. They actually went and found provincial capital that we could use on this local project. They should be getting rewarded for taking the initiative. Instead, the councillor was punished. The staffer was a certain councillor ripped into them and went up one side and down the other, accused them of malfeasance and of all kinds of inappropriate behavior. And the rest of council sat around and let this happen. And that was the worst part for me, was the other councillors sat back and did nothing. And I actually tracked a few of them down and said, what is going on? And what I kept hearing from people is, well, nobody takes this person seriously. And that's not good enough for me, because that person is allowed to impugn the professionalism and the integrity of our staff, and they're allowed to do it with impunity. And nobody is calling them out on it. And that is, I can't, there aren't words to express how profoundly wrong that feels to me. And so when staff exercise empowered leadership, when they take on courageous change, they're doing it in spite of all of the institutional force that's being pushed against them. And until that changes, we're never going to see this as the rule. It's always going to be the exception.